You're not authorized to be here, I said, barely looking up from the terminal as Travis let himself into the server room like he owned it. Fluorescent lights buzzed above us. He was holding a Starbucks cup like it was a mic drop. No offense, he started, like that made anything better, but your control over the system feels excessive. We'll be taking full admin access going forward. The silence after that was the kind that only lives between two people who know exactly how screwed one of them is, and Travis hadn't figured out which yet. I tapped a key, the screen lit up with a locked-out shell and a blinking prompt waiting for biometric confirmation. My confirmation. His name wasn't even in the authorization tree, and that's when it clicked for him. His smirk faltered just enough. Before we go deeper, if you're into stories where the quiet one holds the detonator, tap that subscribe button and like the video. 97% of you don't, but it keeps us going, and you won't want to miss what happens next. I didn't rise, I didn't explain. I just said, not without legal. Because the second he stepped into my space and called it his, he turned what could have been a transition into a war. I wasn't just the custodian of this system. I was the architect of its backbone, and I'd made damn sure it didn't belong to anyone who hadn't read the fine print. Castellan Holdings LLC, my LLC, formed in 2016, registered and validated. All development done off hours on personal hardware using cloud resources billed directly to me. I didn't use company time, I didn't use company machines, and I sure as hell didn't use company IP. But Travis didn't care. Travis came from startups, where code was copy-pasted from Stack Overflow and every intern's lunch break turned into a branding brainstorm. His idea of ownership was whoever yelled the loudest. Mine was notarized, time-stamped, and sitting in legal's shared drive with a signature from the previous COO. There was a reason they called me the quiet one. Quiet doesn't mean powerless. Back in 2019, I'd built a scalable permission system, SecureStack, that could deploy hierarchical access roles across hybrid cloud networks in under 90 seconds. It wasn't just fast, it was surgical, real-time revocation, rotating encryption keys, multi-tenant segregation. Half the engineers at Virion didn't even understand how it worked. They just knew that if Castellan went down, so did every secure deployment pipeline from QA to production. Every login, every data packet, every credentials reset touched my system. They didn't just use it, they depended on it. And Travis, he just thought it was the back end. So when I got that all-staff email 3 weeks after his arrival, subject line, credential consolidation with a bullet point demanding full admin access to all core systems by Friday EOD, I didn't panic. I didn't reply all. I just pulled my records. The 2016 carve-out agreement, the time-stamped development logs, cloud hosting bills, Git history showing commits from my home network on nights and weekends, Section 8.2c of my contract, signed by legal in bold. Employer disclaims ownership of platforms developed externally with private resources and outside paid hours. But Travis didn't CC legal. He didn't even CC my manager. He posted on Slack, "If you built it while working here, we control it." Like that was gospel. I reread his message twice. Not because it surprised me, but because it confirmed exactly what I'd suspected since the moment he asked how to reset a sandbox environment in front of the entire engineering team. He didn't know the systems. He didn't care about the chain of custody. He wanted control for control's sake. I'd spent over a decade building quietly, maintaining quietly, delivering excellence without fanfare. But when you mistake silence for weakness, when you try to bulldoze what you don't understand, that's when the quiet ones make noise. And Travis had no idea what kind of volume I was capable of. It was a Wednesday. I remember that because the office coffee machine had just been descaled, and for once didn't taste like scorched dirt. I took my first sip and opened my inbox, and there it was. A subject line that made my stomach drop before I even read the body. Credential consolidation, action required. I clicked. By Friday EOD, I expect full administrative credentials across all core systems. That was it. No explanation, no context, no legal CC. Just Travis's name signed off like this was some school group project and not a corporate infrastructure with federal data contracts layered in. I didn't even blink. I just opened Slack and typed, "Can you clarify which systems this applies to?" He replied in under a minute. "If you built it while working here, we control it. Simple as that." Simple as that. Like employment automatically turned every keystroke into company property. Like a salary check erased the LLC registration, the carve-out clause, the time-stamped commits from my personal network logged on weekends, holidays, and late nights when everyone else was posting photos from their lake houses. Like Travis's opinion overrode the law. I didn't argue. I didn't waste energy trying to teach contract law to someone who thought root access was a vibe. I just went to my archive drive, pulled up the 2016 agreement. Section 8.2c stared back at me like an old friend. Employer disclaims ownership of platforms developed externally, with private resources and outside paid hours. Castellan Holdings LLC had been incorporated 2 months before I even signed my second employment renewal. I'd filed the carve-out with HR, with legal, with the CTO at the time. They all signed off. There was a notarized affidavit attached to the employment addendum with 4 bullet points: not company equipment, not company time, not company IP, not disputable. I pulled the hosting receipts. My AWS bills all billed directly to my personal card. Server logs showing IPs from my home office, Git commits at 11:46 p.m., 2:12 a.m., Sundays, holidays, you name it. And the most important log of all, an internal compliance memo dated 2 years ago, listing Castellan explicitly as a licensed third-party architecture tied to my user credentials, not the company's. I knew the weight of what I had. I also knew the kind of man Travis was. He thought speed meant strength, that urgency replaced oversight, that titles outranked truth. He'd only been there 3 weeks and already fired 2 managers in restructuring, shifted 4 vendor contracts without procurement review, and tried to rename the infrastructure team to Cloud Ops Vanguard. He liked to swagger through meetings, mispronounce acronyms, and dismiss caution as cowardice. I'd seen the type before. They flame out fast, unless someone hands them matches. And that's what I was being asked to do, hand over the matches. He wanted admin credentials, not just to the systems I maintained, but the core permissions engine itself. SecureStack wasn't just code, it was control. Whoever held those keys could lock down, reroute, audit, override. It was power wrapped in quiet code. And he wanted it by Friday. I didn't respond. Not right away. Instead, I walked to the break room and watched him through the glass. He was at his desk, laughing too loudly, probably at his own joke. One hand spinning his AirPods case, the other typing something cocky. Probably a memo, probably another demand. He had no idea he'd just stepped onto a landmine. Because the thing about systems like Castellan is that they don't just control access, they record who tried to take it. And Travis's name was already in the log, unauthorized, flagged, and now that flag was coming with receipts. The meeting invite came with no subject line and a timestamp that made it clear they didn't want to give me time to prepare, 10:45 a.m. on a Thursday. Quick check-in, it said, from Travis. No agenda, no context, just my name on the calendar with his and HR's like I'd been scheduled for deletion. When I walked into the glass box they called a conference room, Travis was already leaning back like he'd been waiting all morning to deliver this little theater piece. HR sat beside him with her laptop open, posture tight. She couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't bother sitting. We're consolidating leadership, Travis said, using that tone men like him mistake for firm but fair. Thank you for your contributions. We'll handle transition access internally. He slid a paper across the table. Black ink, clean bullet points, every system I'd ever touched, every integration I'd designed, every server, sandbox, switch, archive, all with a checkbox next to it, like it was some offboarding checklist for an intern, not the architecture I built with my own hands. Then he said it. We'll need Castellan's master token as well. It's company integrated, that makes it ours. He said it with a smirk, like the word integrated was a magical clause that voided contracts, LLC registrations, and the last 7 years of documented carve-outs, like a man peeing on a wall made it his house. I took the list, folded it once, then again, put it in my bag like a grocery receipt, and I said, not without legal. No raised voice, no dramatic exit, just the truth, spoken plainly. Travis blinked like I'd spoken a foreign language. I walked out without waiting for HR's scripted condolences. I didn't slam the door, I didn't make a scene, that's not my style. But what I did do, before I even left the building, was forward a single folder to my private legal counsel, labeled Castellan Escrow Trigger, Pre-Breach Evidence. Inside was everything: contracts, receipts, deployment logs, and one signed copy of the carve-out that included an addendum Travis had clearly never seen. I didn't go home. I went to a coffee shop 2 blocks away, ordered a tea I wouldn't drink, opened my laptop. And from that moment forward, every attempt they made to access Castellan's core was logged, encrypted, and mirrored to a third-party escrow account, including Travis's. He thought it was over. He didn't realize I'd just activated the dead man's switch. By 9:14 a.m. the next morning, I'd already received 2 missed calls and one hilariously vague email from someone in legal I hadn't heard from in years. Subject line, "Following up, urgent." The kind of corporate panic that smells like someone just realized they lit the wrong fuse and now the building's starting to hum. But I didn't reply. I let it sit. Gave them time to stew, gave them time to scroll through the bundle I'd dropped into their general counsel's inbox at exactly 10:00 a.m. the night before, time stamped down to the second. It wasn't just a collection of receipts, it was a curated reckoning. Item 1. A detailed log of Castellan's codebase, commits tagged with location metadata and system fingerprints, every one of them from offsite IPs, logged outside my very own hours, with hashes linked to the off-grid deployment cluster I paid for with my personal Amex. Item 2. Server invoices going back 6 years, not a single line billed to Virion, all tied to my LLC's EIN, all on file with AWS, Azure, and GCP. The trifecta of proof. Item 3. A scanned PDF of my employment carve-out, signed in 2016 by the then head of legal and the former V of Ops, who, unlike Travis, knew how to read. Right there in Section 8.2c, bolded and underlined, retained IP, secure stack, and derivative works. Item 4. The state registration for Castellan Holdings LLC, filed, active, and backed by my accountant's name. Registered address, my own home. The last page of the PDF bundle simply read, "Any unauthorized attempt to access Castellan or SecureStack shall constitute a material breach under Section 8.2c. They thought I was bluffing. Travis especially had walked into this like he was flipping a switch, that the power I built was on loan, that with one shake of a title and a printed list he could absorb it into his kingdom. He didn't realize the moat had teeth. And now, with that bundle floating through legal, someone, maybe for the first time, finally sat back in their overpriced ergonomic chair and whispered, "Oh no." Because here's the part no one ever explains to these overconfident middle managers with LinkedIn buzzwords and a podcast addiction. Ownership is a process. You don't just declare it, you prove it, you record it, you protect it. And once that bundle landed, the demand Travis made, the one he delivered with HR sitting next to him, smug and clueless, wasn't just overreach. It was exposure. A written record of a VP requesting unauthorized access to a third-party controlled infrastructure without review, without counsel, and without a single legal leg to stand on. That morning, I received nothing from Travis. No Slack, no emails, radio silence. But someone else finally reached out. Subject line, requesting clarification re Section 8.2c. Not from HR, not from Ops, from the General Counsel's office. They were sweating now, and it was only Thursday. By lunchtime, they were tearing through contract archives like rats trapped in a pantry. You could feel the desperation pulsing through the quiet. Messages got shorter, meeting invites got longer. I got pinged by someone in compliance who hadn't spoken to me in years, suddenly very curious if I had a few minutes to align on system scope. Behind the scenes, legal was tearing up floorboards. They weren't looking for truth. They were hunting for loopholes. Anything. A dusty override, a retroactive clause, some errant signature from a long-gone exec that might save them from what was now clearly a VP-triggered firestorm. Nothing surfaced. Not one signature, not one amended clause, and that's when it flipped. From quiet panic to corporate CPR. Someone in legal finally asked the real question. When did Travis first request admin control over Castellan? The answer landed like a freight train. They found the Slack thread. Not mine, his, buried in a private channel. A message from Travis to another manager. We need full admin on Castellan. I don't care if she built it off hours. It's too embedded. We need clearer control. Dated exactly 2 weeks after I'd submitted a compliance memo, co-signed by the CTO at the time, stating that Castellan was licensed under third-party use, not internal development. That memo had been logged, time-stamped, uploaded to the policy portal, and marked acknowledged by the infrastructure group. They had it. They ignored it. And now they were playing catch up on a hill made of broken protocols and legal landmines. Worse, the audit logs didn't lie. Every deploy, every test environment, every credential rotation, every disaster recovery drill, all ran through Castellan's orchestration layer. Even their precious investor reporting dashboards, backed by secure stack pipelines. They hadn't just depended on my system, they'd built a multi-million-dollar trust structure on something they didn't own, and now they couldn't access it. They needed what they couldn't touch. And touching it, forcefully without agreement, would trigger breach clauses across every active federal contract they held. I wasn't the one blocking them. Their own audit logs were. By 3:20 p.m., I knew exactly how bad it had gotten. One of my former team leads texted me from a personal number. They're redlining your old carve-out in panic. It's a legal triage tent over here. I didn't reply, but I did open my laptop and watched as someone from Virion attempted to reset Castellan's recovery protocol. It flagged. Auto-escalated, logged their internal IP, they were trying to pry the door open, and now they'd left fingerprints. They say ignorance is bliss, but in this case, ignorance was about to shave a few million off their valuation. Late Friday afternoon, while Virion's legal team was still tripping over themselves trying to redline history into submission, an investor friend of mine, one of the rare few who actually reads pitch decks, sent me a screenshot. "Thought you'd appreciate this," he wrote. It was from the Q3 investor presentation. Slide 14. Projected scalability gains, 43% increase in deployment efficiency, 26% reduction in credential breach exposure, 31% savings in infrastructure load balancing, all backed by one proud, bright header, secured via internal orchestration layer, proprietary My System. Castellan. Listed as internal. They hadn't just used it, they sold it, framed it as native IP, pitched it to stakeholders like Travis, coded it in his spare time between podcast episodes and firing people. And here's where things went from dumb to dangerous. The virtual desktop integration rollout, something their CTO had touted during a tech demo just a week prior, was no longer live. I'd set it up months ago to disable itself via time-locked automation the moment my credentials were marked inactive. The day they tried to push me out, it triggered. Castellan's secure stack cut off deployment flow to all VDI endpoints. No more real-time credential provisioning. No live updates. No seamless access sync between on-prem and cloud workspaces. In short, the thing they were showing investors didn't exist anymore, and they didn't know. Not Travis, not the CTO, not anyone sitting in front of that slide deck telling stakeholders about our next-gen security backbone. Because the bridge had collapsed, and the only person who knew how it worked was the one they tried to erase with a 2-line HR memo and a smirk. I opened my logs. Their CTO's service account had tried 3 times to ping Castellan's sandbox since 11 a.m. All 3 failed. Error code 402, unauthorized third-party access. And each time, it triggered a clause buried in the licensing terms that required notification to our legal partner and audit trail replication. They weren't just fumbling in the dark. They were setting off flares with every touch. Meanwhile, I got another message, this one from an old engineer I trained years ago, now in risk management. "Off the record," she wrote. "They're scrambling. The deck's already out. They thought Castellan was built here. Travis told the CTO you'd fold eventually." Fold? Let me be clear. I didn't build Castellan to fold. I built it because I knew eventually someone like Travis would walk through those doors with a smile, a mandate, and no respect for the scaffolding they stood on. They sold access they didn't own, promised features they couldn't deploy, pitched growth off a system they couldn't explain, and now that the bridge had vanished, their whole roadmap looked like a fantasy written in dry erase marker. It wasn't just that they needed Castellan. They'd already bet the quarter on it. And I'd already walked away with the key. 2 days later, I walked into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Verity Nexus campus, handed a pen across a conference table, and signed the deal that would quietly kneecap the company that tried to erase me. They didn't even haggle. Verity Nexus had been circling Castellan for months, ever since one of their execs caught a whiff of what our orchestration engine could really do during a leaked demo reel. They'd reached out before, back when I was still under the Virion umbrella, and I'd politely declined. Loyalty meant something to me then, but loyalty is a two-way street, and Virion had turned mine into a cul-de-sac. So when I took that call, it wasn't personal. It was practical. "Let's make it exclusive," their general counsel said. "Compliance suite, full stack integration, and we'll push marketing within the quarter. You want your own deployment environment? Done. You want top billing on the security stack? Done. We'll even foot the transition overhead. They knew what Castellan could do. They knew what it meant to embed something that cut deployment time in half while tightening breach exposure by triple digits. And most importantly, they knew Virion had just tried to walk off with it and failed. The phrase their counsel used still sticks with me. A quiet kill switch. He wasn't wrong. Castellan wasn't a tool. It was a framework. Agile, self-healing, with access boundaries that adapted in real time to credential drift. Plug it into the right system, and suddenly your competition starts bleeding efficiency just trying to keep up. By the time I'd finalized the integration paperwork with Verity, the buzz had already started. Not publicly, not in the press, but in inboxes, at roundtables, on those late-night investor calls where people stop talking in buzzwords and start asking real questions, which made the email from Virion's legal team land with a thud. Request for mediation. No apology, no acknowledgement, just one line at the bottom of the message. We would like to discuss terms. Terms. Now they wanted terms. After staging a soft firing, after trying to backdoor into my system, after misrepresenting Castellan to stakeholders and waving my work around like it was theirs. I didn't call them. I didn't even write the response myself. I forwarded it to my legal rep, attached the 2016 carve-out, the clause in bold, and told her to reply with one sentence. Refer to the carve-out, or escalate to the founder, because they could keep pushing all they wanted. But from that moment on, they'd be pushing uphill, against an asset they never owned, a system they couldn't touch, and a market that now belonged to me. Monday morning, 9:52 a.m. sharp, my inbox chimed with a system-marked priority message flagged red. Subject, IP governance escalation. Direct review requested. Sender, exec assistant at Virion.c. They'd pulled the trigger. The founder escalation requested per IP governance procedure. Please be available for a private video conference at 12:00 p.m. today with Dominic Farrell. Farrell, the ghost in the walls, the man whose name still lingered in the company's origin documents, but who hadn't attended a board meeting in over a year. When he stepped down, the press called it a strategic transition. But I knew the truth. He was exhausted, burned out from carrying vision in a building full of egos trying to monetize it to death. Still, his signature sat beneath every one of the early carve-outs, including mine. At noon, the call opened with no pleasantries, just his face, older, grayer, but not confused. Is what they presented yours? That was all he said. No accusations, no small talk, just the question, the only one that mattered. I didn't speak. I shared my screen, pulled up the repo, full commit history, time-stamped metadata. Every line traced back to Castellan Holdings' IP address range. Every push, every merge, every build completed from external systems. Next, deployment logs, not one tied to internal Virion infrastructure, all marked with Castellan's license headers, all registered through my LLC. Then the licensing contracts, digital signatures, audit chain, federal registration, state filings, clause 8.2c in bold and highlighted, the addendum signed by Virion's previous legal team, verifying external IP rights retention, Farrell's own initials on the footer. When I finished, I looked back up. He was staring at the screen, elbows resting on the table, hands folded like he was in a courtroom. 10 full seconds of silence. Then he leaned back and said only, "Thank you. We'll be in touch." The screen faded to black. No denial, no counterpoint, no PR shield, just recognition. The quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need to be said out loud to land like a gavel. Because unlike Travis, Dominic Farrell read contracts, understood intellectual property. And above all, he knew who built what. He didn't need a tech demo, he didn't need a memo, he just needed to see the receipts. And now that he had, the cleanup wouldn't be mine. It would be theirs. 2 weeks later, buried somewhere between a quarterly revenue footnote and a bland press blurb about organizational efficiencies, Virion submitted an amended SEC filing. It was subtle, but I noticed. Of course I noticed. Page 37, paragraph 4. The phrase internally developed access control architecture had been removed. Quietly, cleanly, no strike-through, no apology, just gone like it never existed. In its place, a sterile line about licensed external orchestration frameworks. Translation: they finally admitted the truth. Travis Melton was no longer with the company. No farewell memo, no LinkedIn announcement, just a single sentence in a corporate newsletter. We're undergoing a realignment of leadership roles to better support long-term growth. If you blinked, you'd miss it, but I didn't blink. Because while they were busy trying to erase my name from the system I built, I was finalizing something else entirely. 3 federal contracts, each one with its own appendix, each bearing the same clause in the same font, bolded just enough to be noticed by anyone who mattered. Core IP retained by Castellan Holdings LLC, not subject to employee assignment. There were no more questions, no more meetings, no more veiled threats disguised as calendar invites. The line had been drawn, and more importantly, it held. I never raised my voice, never stormed into a boardroom, never leaked anything to the press. I just made sure the paper trail was longer than the lies. And when they came for what they didn't own, they found out, too late, that the quiet one had already left with the blueprint, the keys, and the market. They tried to consolidate control. I consolidated ownership. Let them keep their press releases. I'll take the contracts.